Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Punuktu Saviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May our studies be illumined and efficient. May we have vigor and strength. And may we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So we pick up once more a study of the 18th chapter, the final and summary chapter entitled Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Last week, we covered a number of areas, and derived from last week, somebody who is present with us has one question. I'll ask them, would they mind repeating the question?
Swami, you explained very nicely the Varna system last time, but you said that within the same family you can have many different Varnas. But then, so it's based on the nature, and it's also based on the birth to a certain degree, but you can change it. So you may be born in a Brahmin family, but you may take up an occupation like a Vaishya. So is it the right understanding, or is it, am I missing something? So is there a mobility inbuilt in this process, or is it hereditary and fixed?
So the question is, in case it wasn't heard by the recording, the Varna system that is described here in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, this fourfold caste system is said to be divinely instituted. And it was mentioned that within the same family, all the four castes can arise because the duties of these entities are distributed according to gunas born of their own nature. People are born of their own nature, and these gunas are operating them. What do we mean by that? So two technical terms previously mentioned in this Bhagavad Gita, guna and karma. Guna means that quality that seems to be inherited. You see, it's more than just a quality. It is a scene that was produced previously. Previously means prior to your current birth. That contains within it the seeds of your current life and your future life. And those seeds are derived from your own unfolding after eons and eons, no doubt, many, many births to arrive at this genetic arrangement that we call human, man. Shankaracharya thinks that it is a great, great tragedy if you miss this opportunity with a human body, with a body that has great social advantages, and that is a mind that has discovered these truths that we are studying. And if you have managed to find a competent teacher with all of these advantages, it's something like a suicide to waste it. We don't deliberately want to waste it. The mind is diverted in other ways. The external world has a pull because the gateway to the external world, or the gateways, are 5 gateways. All the sense organs are like gateways to the external world. Consciousness that has our birthright is flowing through these various avenues. And we will find out in this very chapter, there has to be a systematic way of staying there for a moment and redirecting this energy, these energies. This is called spiritual discipline. Now, depending on all these experiences that you accumulated, you come into a set of circumstances, social conditions, certain family, and certain historical era, certain geographic climate, certain religion also, and cultural environment. But of course, it is not haphazard or chaotic according to the system. It is absolutely designed and created by you. When you say by you, we take for granted that we understand that is part of a flow, and that flow is divine grace that unfolds in you and ultimately will come out as perfection. What we call spiritual practice is just accelerating that. It's just giving a catalyst to it. And the more intensely you apply the catalyst called spiritual life, the quicker you get the revelation of truth that's sitting there waiting, as it were. So all these arrangements are made to assist you, but free will is there. And free will determines one of two central paths, either to go toward the path of perfection, which is seen to be the preferred path, preferential path, or the pleasurable path. Pleasurable path means, let me be satisfied with living my life in accordance with the world of the senses. But the world of the senses brings in pain. And so, when the pain is acute, we look to something deeper, something higher, something more rewarding, something more enduring. That really is the start of spiritual life. There are many people who say, oh, I read the Bhagavad Gita, or I've seen something online, or I heard lectures, it's good enough for me. But that's not really how we take this on. So coming back to your question, this is the guna side of it. That is, that there is an inherent entity within you that physicalists, materialists, who see nothing more than chance events, trace back to your genetic arrangement passed on by XY chromosomes and delivered to your particular individual mutation, that is you. Because you, in that sense, is identified as a physical you, but it doesn't account for a mental you, a psychological you. And this is really where the real internal person occurs. This is where the real personality is. This is the assemblage of behaviors and habits that comes. Now, part of this accumulation is from your previous response to these external events. The human body is there. It dies, no doubt. But the thrust of your intention, your soul carries on. Jivatman carries on, continues the journey, as it were. And that is the unique aspect, I suppose, in religious terms, of a system that says that we don't acknowledge any linear thing with a start and with a finish. It looks like that, no doubt. But we acknowledge that everything seems to be arranged in a cyclical way, and that when we say beginning, we're talking of the beginning of a cycle, not the beginning on an absolute. So the whole world evolves into from a cycle and enfolds into a cycle, back on itself, as it were. So we come with an inheritance. This we can call guna. And then there's karma. That is, our own response is developed as our personality, responding to the demands of our environment, our parents, what they taught, the influence, and so on. So if you are, by your own account, in other words, by your own investment, by your own build-up, if it's manifest here in a family of Brahmins, then that's fine. But you yourself have to operate according to your particular skills and talents carried forward. Why should that be? Because the behavior that you have is entirely individual. If your father is angry, you should not expect to be angry and not be able to change. All of these are changeable. Because we have a free will, we can decide which path to take at any moment. And we have to deal with the effects of our actions from previously. And we have to deal with the potential effects that are likely to happen in the future because of our activity now And the principal activity we have is thought. We are primarily thinkers. And every action comes from there. But of course, every conscious action finds its deposit in the unconscious mind. And in that area, it comes out as what we call habit, habitual behavior. How to change that habitual behavior? We can only do it through a systematic cultivation in the conscious mind. This whole Bhagavad Gita, therefore, is teaching us how to do this. The divine arrangement is there, and the caste system or this system or 4 functions has 4 duties accompanying them. And last week we went into great detail, Sri Krishna goes into great detail, what these various duties or what should occupy the hands and the mind of the Brahmanas, of the Kshatriyas, of the Vaishyas, of the Shudras. All of these are necessary and they are distributed according to these inherited gunas, these your own actions, nothing fixed, your own actions, born of your own nature, therefore, and you'll continue that journey and accumulate that through karma. So this phrase comes out repeatedly, swabhava, prabhavai, born of their own nature. By what? Gunaha, by qualities. And qualities carry with them a substance. If I repeat strong, 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 strength comes to me. There's an internal shift. Every cell of the body responds with this. Every organ of the body responds to it. There are people now, United States of America, probably still conducting some research. There are clinics, you may say positive thinking clinics. The basis of it is the human organic cells of the body respond to various things, naturally food and water, electrical currents and so on, but primarily thought. Supposing cancer cells have gone wild, what we call a cancer condition, by virtue of wrong thinking, then it makes sense by corrective thinking, you can adjust it. And so there have been remarkable advances and remarkable positive effects from this way of thinking. So everything is malleable, and it is malleable because of psychic prana, that is, energy which we call thought, in a field that we call mind. So we have to be careful what we think. The whole of spiritual life is really essentially controlling the mind, controlling thought, controlling the activities, controlling all the oscillations and vibrations in that stuff that we call the mind. So there's nothing fixed. When we say it's our nature, it means it's born of nature, but nature consists of these 3 things, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Now, there is a likelihood, of course, that we can abuse this system. There is a likelihood, of course, that we can have quarrels, have boycotts, exploitations, and so on. But this only arises when we react or when we act with rajas and tamas dominating. When sattva dominates, then these various differences, these arguments, these social difficulties do not arise. Social dissatisfaction does not arise because it clearly understood that there is a duty. And in the greater context, it's understood. Supposing we believe, supposing we have faith that what we call the entire cosmos, the entire universe, is a careful unfolding of certain designed things. Certain things that have a teleology, a purpose, a direction. Certain things run smoothly. This we call in science the anthropic principle. That is, that there is an arrangement whereby there's a complete and total balance in what we call the universe. And that means that there are certain criteria, certain constants, certain ranges of flexibility beyond which, if we upset these, we upset the entire balance of the entire universe. You may ask a question, and I think I brought it up in an example in one of these talks. But let's just take the simple growth of fruit. Let's just take an apple. How did this apple form? And what is the causation chain that we can trace to make it an apple? We find is very, very complex, because we can say in a simple way, well, apple comes from the tree, but then where does the tree come from? We can say that the soil and the nutrients within the soil was a factor, water was a factor, sunlight was a factor, air was a factor. In fact, all of these things are born of air. We can say that none of that is a factor unless there's an earth. And we say the earth, how did the earth develop to produce even one single mobile organic cell, such as a bacteria? We assume that in the beginning is bacteria. A single cell. If it's rod-shaped, we call this, bacilli. So how did this form? We have a great clue about it because, for example, very recently, the indication is that there are vast underground deposits of water, and that water is likely to be clear and pristine. And wherever you find this water, you find life. So, but what we call water, the blue planet is blue because most of it is water. And we see the short wavelength and it looks blue. So how do we get this blue planet? We can't just say it's a rock. We can trace it back. Of course, we can trace it back all the way to the electrical components of hydrogen and oxygen, and then alone hydrogen. And hydrogen, helium, small amounts of deuterium, lithium, and so on. This comprises the universe. It's mainly hydrogen. So where did this hydrogen come from? There's only one electron, one proton. It can't really easily combine with anything. And when we look at the electron, we're looking at a kind of vague buzz. And how does it respond to gravity? Now, all of these have laws associated with them. And so when we go back and back and back and back and back, we come to, I don't know, something like a quantum field, something that is very vague, something that is universal, something that is subtle, but something that seems to have some deliberate direction to produce an apple. All of these are combined. If we take the universe like that, then we'll also think that there is a reason why we are born, and there is a reason why our food is being digested. We can look at it this way, that God, who created and sustains and preserves and occupies and fills and drives us forward and is behind an unfolding and is itself unfolding, regardless of how we block it or how we divert our attention, still doing it because we have a purpose. This purpose here is delineated as swadharma, your individual duty, the role in life that only you can do. And if you do it with an attitude, the right spirit of sattva, purity, love, detachment from ownership and doership, and profit, detached from any sense I am the body or any of these things, if you can cultivate that, then there'll be none of these difficulties associated with these social distinctions. Furthermore, you'll understand that your role within these classifications, because these classifications are broad classifications. For example, if you're a Vaishya, the range of Vaishya is denoted here in the Bhagavad Gita as agriculture, we can put in modern terms, industry, commerce, retail, wholesale, you can put it all like that. Anything that is contributing toward the wealth of a nation comes under this category, Vaishya. But clearly a farmer and a manufacturer are different and have different roles. You cannot really exchange that. There are many career guidance people who come into established companies. I've heard of various cases, very humorous in a sense. They get paid a lot of money because they are professional industrial psychologists. And having analyzed the personality of somebody, come to a conclusion, oh, I'm sorry, you should not be an accountant. You should be an airline pilot. And now what to do? All my life invested in studying this accountancy, taking BCom and all these other things. And now you tell me I actually should have been studying aerodynamics and flight and the mechanics of airplanes and all of this. And I should have been traveling on an aircraft. So sometimes we think and sometimes we feel that a change of occupation is necessary. And we have to be guided primarily by our skills and our talents and attribute these not to ourselves, but these are divinely arranged. Supposing we think like that, what will be the result? We'll be absolutely content with exactly what we're doing. We won't wish to change anything. Secondly, we'll make sure that we fulfill our function and purpose by doing it with the greatest amount, the maximum amount of efficiency. What does efficiency mean? Efficiency means less input, more output. Taking the energy that we have, not wasting it in anxiety or dissatisfaction or desires or selfishness or combat or criticism or any of these things which we can put under the category of negativity, but turn them into something that is useful and positive for one's own good and the good of others. Because if you're guiding somebody in their career, that is another way of saying identifying what is your swadharma. Where do you fit into society so that the overall scheme works harmoniously, using your inherent skills and talents that you developed or that was developed as a result of your internal evolution. Then the last question should be, having identified what are your skills and talents and abilities, what do you enjoy the most is invariably a good clue toward it. And what can you do better than most other people? The last question in the series is, how can I apply that for the good of others? This brings in the sattvic element. It takes out the rajasic and tamasic element of selfishness. And it doesn't matter what the task is. So invariably, there's an error. And the error is being corrected in this 18th chapter. The error of outlook is, I wish I had more time for my spiritual life. Your whole of your life is spiritual life. There should be no difference. There's no separation. There's no dividing line, secular, spiritual, like that. So in the beginning, we might have such an idea. We might pose a question, when will I get this perfection? When will I get a vision of God? Where is God? And I doubt. And all of these feelings that go with a mature assessment and an element also of impatience that is there with all of us. But there's an inner drive in all of us toward perfection. There's an inner drive in the atomic structure to ultimately produce an apple. And that apple is converted into a human body. And the human body is converted into energy capable of discovering their own inner depth, their own spiritual nature, Atman, what religion describes as the Lord of the universe. So this is all behind this, the necessity to fit in to our allocated structure, our allocated lot. And because it is maintaining the harmony in every level and in every sphere, it is much better it is we put it in this language, it is disastrous to do somebody else's duty because we have certain skills and talents and abilities. So a person trained, for example, in medicine should not really choose to become a lawyer on the ground that he can plead a case very fluently. See, there's this divine arrangement, and within this is all the faith. I am born in the right place. I am born at the right time. I'm born in the right family. I'm born with the right opportunities, whatever they be. So this is all under this heading of duty. And so we left off on the 47th stanza, I think. Better is one's own dharma. That is one's own role in life, one's own duty, one's own activities. Though imperfect, than the dharma of another well performed. The one who does the duty ordained by his own nature incurs no sin, because all activities have blemishes inherent in them. Because all activities are associated with the external world. And so how to dilute that? That is called really spiritual life. And devotion to one's own duty, one's own swadharma, is the sure means to the achievement of these objects. All activities are unfailing means to reach this Godhead. They are not separate from our spiritual life. Arjuna, this is addressed to Arjuna. Arjun's spiritual way is, as a skilled archer that he is, he has to employ his talents and he has to engage in this warfare. This is his duty. So once I was asked, there was a student studying at a university and a Hindu student. So they said, you see, I have a problem with Krishna. What is that? Well, you see, he advocates this violence and bloodshed. This is surely immoral, surely sets a bad example. But you see, they misread it. Krishna is encouraging swadharma. Do your duty. And when your duty becomes less than pleasant, you should not deviate from it. And even if you're doing your duty imperfectly, still it's better than doing somebody else's allocated role in life. So like a jigsaw puzzle, we all fit in. The whole of nature is well fitted together. And the Lord invests his energy in you. In the previous chapter told, as I am your Vaishwanara, see, your inner fire, your digestive fire. The Lord digests the food in every creature because he has a purpose for us. And we have to fulfill this purpose. And what a glorious thing that purpose is, to unfold this divine purpose within us. It is contained inherently in the cell of every body. In the nucleus of the cell is DNA, with over 100,000 coded messages unfolded. If you write out the code, as it were, it will contain so many volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica. Contained in one tiny cell, coiled up your whole potential, waiting to be unfolded. So then, what becomes, why, we should not abandon our duty, yes, okay. Should the aspirant renounce the world then, or all worldly activities? When dispassion and desire for freedom dawn in his mind, is there a point when there is no swadharma? Is there a point when we can give up all activities? That means activities with some purpose in mind. When do we find this fulfillment? And so the next stanza will have to be told. It goes like this. This is 48th. Sahajam karma kuntaya sadosham api na jajit. Salvar paramba hi doshana dhumena gniya eva vritaha. One should not abandon the duty to which one is born. It's attended with evil. All activities have this possibility of drawbacks. But one should, despite that, we should not change our duty. Though it is attended with evil, because all activities are inherently intended like this, for all undertakings are enveloped by evil, that is, by drawbacks. Just as fire by smoke. You hardly see the fire, so much smoke, and even when this fire is going nicely, it has a tendency to float in your direction and create much coughing. Even if it's a havan, it does it. So all activities are attended by some blemishes. But if we do all activities from a sattvic point of view, from this point of view of conservation of energy, in a systematic way, we attend this with a certain system, doing our duty faithfully, because this energy that we're using is not ours, and therefore with a spirit of detachment from any sense of I. That should be there. And then making an offering, we have to add that. An offering of the work, an offering of this ego, the sense of I, at the Lord's feet, that can be added. And if we do that, then the 49th stanza will tell us that this is a condition of Nashkarma Siti, that is a perfect state where no obligatory action, that is, no action for a purpose, no purpose is gone because fulfillment is there. That takes place. So the truth reveals itself to the one who desists from things like likes and dislikes, pairs of opposites. The kind of dissatisfaction. On Sunday I was asked a question about contentment. How is contentment different from happiness? Because happiness, if you were to lay it out on some kind of graph, it would have peaks and troughs. There would be dramatic pauses between happy, unhappy. Contentment is an even line. It means always there. A feeling of nothing more to gain, nothing to lose. An equanimity of mind that has to be cultivated. So there's no action whatsoever in nature which is completely free, really, from blemish, from evil, because that means the whole universe will cease to function. The whole universe has to be this interaction of these three gunas in nature. Nature itself is comprised of these three great forces, which we call gunas, and they're actually substantial components of the universe. And so without this continuous struggle between the aspect of projecting Shristi and the aspect of hiding, projecting and hiding, projecting and hiding, the whole universe is like that, with the possibility of glimpsing and seeing, there's the truth. It's similar to the example of the smoke and the fire. Seeing all the smoke, not really registering there's a fire. Then, by inference, there's a fire. This statement is there's no smoke without fire. Is one of the principal evidences produced, or factors for evidences produced in Nyaya logic, that we infer. And the inference example is, if we see some smoke over a hill, we infer, no doubt there's fire. We haven't seen the fire directly, but we infer it. And then when the smoke clears, to actually see the fire is equivalent to the sattvic element, sattva. We do it by blowing away the smoke, as it were, or the evil aspect of it. So a spiritual practitioner suspends all bodily activities and practices austerity in a mountain cave. The body is fostered by others, vegetates like that without being useful in its turn. That's not what we feel is the highest. And there's no action, no karma, completely free from any evil. When we eat, then matter has to be expelled. That's the fact of it. It's the fact of the universe. If it was completely symmetrical, nothing would move. So why should there be any distinction between virtue and vice? So the great ones have advocated virtue, they've denounced vice, because it is the balancing component, it is the revealing component ultimately, it is the purifying component. So which among the acts of man can be accepted as virtuous and which rejected as vice, which is dharma, which is adharma? And so among the fuels, that which smokes too much is bad. In this example, that which produces so much smoke that it obscures the fire itself, and less is good. I used to joke when people used to say, ask, do you smoke? I say, only when I'm on fire. So, and then maybe a lot of puffing would take place as well. So there was in Zimbabwe, probably still today, there was a great backbone of the Zimbabwean economy, and many African countries had it. There was production of tobacco for smoking, but there's been a whole campaign against that now. I'll always remember the chairman of a particular tobacco company being asked when secondhand smoking was controversial. So they were asked, what do you think of secondhand smoking? He says, I think it's absolutely appalling. People should buy their own cigarettes, was his reply. So the point is, we're generating this smoke. We ourselves are generating it, or we're certainly not clearing it, because all activities have this inherent dimension to it. So among the activities, that which is attendant with more evil than good is vice. And the other, in which there is more good than evil, that really is virtue. All are necessary. You won't get 100% sattva. You can maybe get 98%, you maybe get 90%. And the minimum requirement for our liberation statistically must be a minimum of 51% sattva, 49% other things. But there will always be other things. So it's in accordance with place, it's in accordance with time, circumstances, that these actions become good or bad. And those who know it ought to discern and only do what is good. That is what brings harmony. What is the least selfish position? What is the most generous position? In thought, in word, and in deed. Of course, the accomplished yogi will have their own criteria. They would discharge their duty as an act of worship to the Lord, without any thought, what will I accomplish? When will I accomplish it? How will I accomplish it? A pilgrim who halts at a wayside rest house, he cooks his food there with whatever fuel is available, and then proceeds further. So the attitude is the same. The attitude of the yogi is very much like that, performing for the sake of the Lord that action to which his body is found fit. And that one acts with the sole motive of reaching the state of inaction or Atman. So you can go down a busy street. All the key to karma yoga is that equilibrium, that renunciation and detachment of the mind, so that you may be walking down a busy street with lots of people present, assuming that there's no COVID crisis, of course, and still with noise, with bargaining, with activity, still not being distracted, because internally a state of equilibrium and steadiness is there. Detachment is therefore necessary to make this karma yoga. And so that means this is a sannyasa. Karma yoga is actually karma sannyasa. Karma yoga is the giving up of actions, not physically, not psychologically, but by withdrawing any form of attachment to them on the basis that this is not my energy being used. And every activity is like so many flower offerings at the feet of the Lord. Work, therefore, becomes worship. And so He acts with the sole motive of reaching that state, and the embodied one is obliged to act in a good and useful manner, obliged to do that. You see, you find in, let's say in India, you'll find that where for as long as I can remember, there have been people begging, car stops, and children surround the car looking for money and this and that and the other. And then when you look, where are the spiritual people? They're also begging. How are they contributing in any way to society? Now, supposing they beg their food and withdraw to a cave somewhere and live a hermit life. Supposing they do this for the welfare of all beings, that also is a very powerful action, of course. That can change the entire world. But it's the attitude. And so there should be nobody who thinks that social service is any way divorced from spiritual life. It's the outcome of spiritual attitudes. So a question can arise, how does this person's action become an adoration? And so from the 49th stanza to the 57th stanza, there is a theme. This theme that I've just mentioned, that karma yoga is actually karma sannyasa. Let us take up then this 49th stanza. Asakta buddhihi sarvatra jitatma vigata spraha Naiskarma sitim, I mentioned this term before, Naiskarma karmya sitim paramam samnyasena digachati. That is, he attains. What does he attain? He attains a freedom from any action from karma. That is, he's renounced action. How? Internally. He whose intellect, that is asakta buddhihi, whose intellect is unattached everywhere, who has subdued his physical self, his sense of I, his ego, from whom desire has disappeared, no action there to achieve anything, by renunciation attains the supreme state of freedom from action. Don't forget, I just remind you of the previous stanza that told us that by doing one's swadharma, one's action with due diligence, says he from whom is the evolution of all beings, by whom all this is pervaded, worshipping him with his own duty. That's it. Now we are being told, what does that worship constitute? Man attains what? Attains this perfection. This, what is described, sitim, this perfection. All right, so the karma yogi is engaged actually in intensive activities. All of us are engaged in intensive activities. This modern world is nothing more than a round of intensive activities. One of the greatest challenges of this world is to deal with the pace of it. And you would think that people sitting at home rather than going to an office because of the COVID pandemic will have more leisure time, less traveling time, less stress. It turns out the feedback I get is more stress because people say, oh, working from home, that means, you see, you have more time somehow. I don't know what the logic of that is. And so we can put more things on you because maybe the office structure has gone. Well, it shouldn't go. Because karma yoga implies being efficient with your energy. Don't forget, I'm giving you a definition. That efficiency, don't forget, yoga is skill in action, we are told, and equilibrium of mind. So what is the skill in action? It is using our energy efficiently. Even the efficient use of the energy is a worship. This energy being supplied here at this substation, surely it is my duty to use it to the best of my ability and give back the returns. Like the steward looking after somebody's property. There's a story like that. A person left to supervise a property. Well, he had a job like that. Please, I'm going away on holiday. You look after this property. I have to go away on business also. You look after this property. Then the person became so proud. People asked him, what do you do? He says, I look after my property. Then he took ownership of the property in his own mind. He even convinced himself and others, look, let me show you around my house how gorgeous it is, how gorgeous my land is, how much fruit I'm producing from this. Look, here's my flower garden. Then the owner of the house came back and realized, oh, what have you done? He said, I heard that people were saying that you're saying this is your property. Because coming back all of a sudden, he found this person in the master bedroom at leisure, eating all the food in the fridge and so on, all of that. And naturally, he lost everything. He lost his stewardship of the property. He lost his job. His family could not be fed and so on. These are the consequences of this egoistic input into our actions. So, what is efficiency? Using this energy minimally with maximum output is an engineering term also. A motor that is most efficient, or a machine that is most efficient, is a machine where the energy input is less and the output is more. This is karma yoga. So, busy people, continuously active, it seems there's no rest for anybody. And this spectacle presents to an onlooker of a karma yogi too, because that person also looks as busy as anybody else. They're doing their job. But what is different is their attitude. They do not identify themselves with any place, with any residence, not even with any occupation, wherever that person happens to be placed in life, is accepted by that person as their residence. Whatever lands on their plate is accepted as their God-given gift of duty. And again, things are being handled in abundance by this person, and that person is not getting attached to them. As they come in profusely, because when we've tapped into the source of abundance, it all flows to us unasked. But even so, they know the danger of being attached to it. So there's no modification of any kind in their activities, but only in the mind of the yogi. And there's a great example. See, water flows under a bridge. There's no difference between the water before the bridge, the water afterwards, except in terms of position. I'm not sure who it was, one of the Greek philosophers who said, you never step in, and probably Plato, you never step into the same river twice, because that's flowing and new water is coming in. But from the position of the bridge, they have no business with the water. So such a person is like the bridge, and the water flows, and they know they're not coming with it, and they know they're not going with it. Being like that, observing the flow of all activities, in this way engages. He takes no note of the people drawn to him, of the people indifferent to him, whether you praise, whether you blame, what people say, what they don't say. That's the state of the intellect of one who is unattached everywhere. Thoughts and feelings arise in the minds of the ordinary people, even as waves do on the sea. But the mind of the yogi is in a very different state. It's like a waveless sea, placid, calm. because all the waves are settled, and he's now exercising mastery over the corporeal self or the psychophysical self. So objects of sense pleasures, they can all be displayed plentifully. They can be displayed by an innocent child. You take an innocent child, they have no idea. They don't have any covetous look on them. They don't desire what adults desire. And so in the same way, yogi also doesn't behold those objects with any wistful eyes, because actually that entity has outgrown these things. It's a question of maturity. Anything less than that is childishness, and we behave in very childish ways. When we examine our behavior, we can classify it very easily as a kind of childish behavior, and reminds us of how we behaved when we were a child, emotionally or temperamentally. But to be childlike, that is to look at things with a kind of innocence of a child, that kind of detachment, such a karma yogi has. So the person who is obviously the doer of great activities is in reality a sannyasin, not somebody who does nothing. Somebody who's doing great activities, moving the world, a great world mover. Look at the great activity of Swami Vivekananda, how he managed to change the world and have an impact all these many years later. So what was the key? Was he just retired? Did he say, I'm doing nothing, no activity? Intensely active to the point where they called him the whirlwind, taking America by storm, like a great, great whirlwind, transforming everything in his wake, and speaking with such great dynamism. See, we Swamis, we speak and so on, and very often we now read the speeches and great talks of Swami Vivekananda, and we say, oh, he must have had something. We don't have that. And yes, what did he have? He had behind him immense faith in this grace that flowed through him. And because of that, he was not moving. He was not talking. His attitude was that this entity behind is flowing through. A kind of detachment like that. And in doing that, became a world mover. So the state of actionlessness, and the state of what we call Brahmavastha, these are one and the same. Now let us take a look. And this will be the last stanza that we'll examine this evening. Siddhim prapto yatha brahma tatapnoti dibodhami samasenai va kuntaya nishta jnanasya ya para. So, learn, says he, from me in brief, how reaching such perfection is he attains to that Brahman, this state, that supreme consummation of knowledge, the state of siddhi, perfection. What is necessary? So what I mentioned was that there has to be some systematic way, additional to your duty, some systematic cultivation of things that we have to do. And so the 50th stanza is delineating some of these. We'll peep into the next one and go back. We'll repeat as a background the 50th stanza next week and go on to explore some of these things. But the 51st tells, endowed with pure understanding, restraining the self with firmness, turning away from sound and other objects, and abandoning attraction and aversion. Now you see from the 50th stanza that this perfection is inherent in every single atom according to the system. This is not according to the modern physicalist. According to the modern physicalist, and when we say modern, we mean from several centuries ago to now, that decided that this universe was blank, inert stuff operating in a random condition. And with that premise, they try to work out what is the basis and outcome of this universe. How does it work? And they can come to no conclusions because their premise is wrong. They start off with a wrong a priori axiom that this world is dead stuff. We don't take this view. You see, when we agree that there is such a thing as cosmic and biological evolution, we also understand this principle of involution. And the example for it is this: you cannot get an oak tree from a seed which is of a different species. The oak tree is exactly, potentially contained fully in the seed and just unfolds. And the meaning of evolution is unfolding. It's like if I take a piece of paper, and I may have used this example before, and fold it up, then I'm unfolding it. I'm not creating anything new. It's already there. It just is unfolded. This is called evolution. The paper side of it is ignored. So what is being involved? If evolution provides for a brain that is able to bypass the evolutionary process, for example, man has a great desire and has always had way back from the Greek times to fly like a bird, and realize that creating feathery wings and jumping off a cliff doesn't work. Gravity takes the person, ending up in disaster. But man's ingenuity and understanding of aerodynamics has bypassed the long eons of time necessary to unfold to that state and fulfill the desire to fly by changing the biological structure, and invented airplanes. So man's brain evolved like that. Man's intelligence that has come out must mean inevitably that the intelligence was there from the very beginning, inside an atom, inside an electron, inside a quark, inside all the subatomic particles, inside quantum fields, there at the beginning. It must be there and unfolds and develops. And so we can say the whole universe is moving toward this state of siddhi, this state of perfection. And man's caught up at the top end of it, on the very verge of self-discovery. Only requires a certain channeling, a certain systematization, a certain practical implementation of these profound principles that we know and that we understand. And so this consummation of knowledge is being explained, and the stanza that starts off with this explanation tells us, Buddhya vishuddhaya yukto dhritya tvanam niyam cha shabdadhin vishayam styakta ragadveshau yudhasya cha. Endowed with this intellect, with pure intellect, pure understanding, with a purified intellect, you might say. How so? By restraining the body, the mind, the avenue to the external world, with firmness, with steadiness. Practice is not necessary. Steady practice is necessary. If you want to be a world-class pianist, you'll have to practice solidly, consistently, regularly, every day. Correct your mistakes as you go. And turning away from, this is very interesting that of all senses mentioned, that is, we have to shabdadhin, that is sound and other things, because all of these external things, the whole external world, including the body, which is external to our understanding, is a set of vibrations. When these vibrations are caught by the external manifestation of them, called the air, this is called shabda, this is called sound. The whole universe is a manifestation of all of this. So the wonderful that this is mentioned as a primary sense and others, other objects. The sense organs themselves are objects made from exactly the same components as the sense organs made from exactly the same components as the sense objects. And then abandoning what? This pull, this attraction and aversion, the magnetic pull outward and this aversion away. So we'll pick that up. Actually, we'll start next week from the 51st stanza and we'll explore that. We'll repeat this, expand on it, explain it, and move on. On this theme, karma yoga is karma sannyasa. So this is the conclusion of this evening. And so what can we take away from a practical point of view from this? To do all your actions as best you can with the best use of the energy available, knowing it is not yours, and doing it in a sattvic way where no self-interest is necessary or possible, because everything is registered not to you, but to the Lord of the universe. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.